In a small, quiet town in Georgia, life moved at its own pace. The streets were lined with old oak trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Neighbors knew each other by name, and everyone seemed to share a sense of belonging. It was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and children played freely in the yards. But beneath this picture-perfect surface, cracks began to show on one fateful summer evening. An incident that would change everything. Maria Thompson had lived in this town for over 20 years. She was a hard-working woman who raised her son, Jamal, alone after her husband passed away when Jamal was just 5. Despite the challenges, Maria worked tirelessly as a nurse at the local hospital, ensuring her son had everything he needed. Her days were long, filled with early shifts and late-night errands, but she never complained. To Maria, providing a stable life for Jamal was worth every sacrifice. On this particular evening, Maria finished her shift later than usual. Exhausted but determined, she stopped by the grocery store to pick up a few essentials before heading home. As she drove down the familiar roads, her mind wandered to thoughts of dinner and spending some quality time with Jamal. He was growing up so fast, and these moments together meant the world to her. But fate had other plans. Just as Maria turned onto Main Street, she noticed flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Confused, she slowed her car and pulled over to the side of the road. She hadn't been speeding, nor had she run any stop signs. What could this be about? Taking a deep breath, Maria rolled down her window and waited for the officer to approach. 2 police officers stepped out of their patrol car, their boots crunching against the gravel. One of them, a tall man with a stern expression, walked toward Maria's vehicle while the other lingered near the squad car, watching silently. The first officer leaned into her window, his face unreadable. "License and registration, please," he said curtly, his tone devoid of warmth. Maria nodded politely, reaching into her glove compartment for the requested documents. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked calmly, trying to keep her voice steady. The officer glanced at her license briefly before speaking again. "Your taillight is broken," he stated flatly, pointing toward the back of her car. "Didn't you notice?" Maria frowned slightly. She always made sure her car was well maintained. It was part of her routine. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was broken," she replied honestly. "I'll get it fixed as soon as possible." Instead of acknowledging her response, the officer's demeanor shifted. His voice grew sharper, almost accusatory. "You know, people like you really need to take better care of your vehicles," he remarked, his words dripping with disdain. Maria felt a pang of unease. "People like me? What did that mean?" Before she could respond, the second officer chimed in, adding fuel to the fire. "Yeah, maybe if folks around here paid more attention, we wouldn't have to deal with stuff like this all the time," he sneered, looking directly at Maria. Their comments stung deeply. Cutting through the polite exterior Maria tried to maintain, she clenched her jaw, refusing to let them see how much their words affected her. "I assure you, sir, I've always taken good care of my car," she said firmly, her voice tinged with frustration. "If there's an issue, I'll fix it immediately." But the officers weren't interested in listening. They continued to berate her, their tone becoming increasingly hostile. Maria realized they weren't just criticizing her car, they were targeting her identity. Their remarks carried undertones of prejudice, making it clear that their treatment of her wasn't based solely on the supposed traffic violation. As the confrontation dragged on, Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. She hated feeling powerless, especially in front of authority figures who were supposed to protect and serve. Yet she knew better than to argue further. Arguing might only escalate the situation, and she didn't want to risk endangering herself or Jamal waiting for her at home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the officers handed her a ticket and told her to move along. Maria accepted, it wordlessly, gripping the steering wheel tightly as she drove away. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from anger and humiliation. How could this happen in her own town, among people she thought she knew? When Maria arrived home, she parked the car and sat there for a moment, collecting herself. She didn't want Jamal to see her like this, vulnerable and shaken. But Jamal, now 15, was sharp-eyed and observant. As soon as she walked through the door, he noticed something was off. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, concern etched across his face. "What happened?" Maria hesitated, unsure how to explain. But Jamal persisted, sensing that something serious had occurred. Reluctantly, Maria recounted the entire incident, the broken taillight, the rude remarks, the blatant disrespect. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her cheeks. Jamal listened quietly, his fists clenched in anger. He couldn't believe anyone would treat his mom like that. She worked so hard, gave so much to others, and yet these officers acted as though she deserved to be humiliated. Something inside him ignited, a fierce desire to make things right. Without wasting another second, Jamal grabbed his phone and opened Instagram. Scrolling through profiles aimlessly, he stumbled upon Vin Diesel's page. The actor was known not only for his roles in action-packed blockbusters, but also for his genuine personality and willingness to stand up for justice. Though Jamal doubted Diesel would ever see his message, he decided it was worth a shot. With trembling fingers, Jamal typed out a heartfelt note. "Hi, Mr. Diesel, my name is Jamal and I live in a small town in Georgia. My mom got pulled over today for no reason and the cops insulted her because of her race. She's the strongest person I know, and seeing her hurt breaks my heart. Please, if you can, help us bring attention to this. No one should be treated like this." After hitting send, Jamal collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but hopeful. He didn't expect a reply. He barely even expected Diesel to read it. Celebrities rarely engaged with random messages from strangers. Still, sending that message gave Jamal a glimmer of hope in an otherwise dark situation. What Jamal didn't know was that Vin Diesel often scrolled through his direct messages, looking for stories that resonated with him. When he saw Jamal's heartfelt plea, he paused. Something about the raw emotion in the teenager's words struck a chord. Diesel read the message again, then once more, letting it sink in. Within hours, Jamal's phone buzzed with notifications. At first he ignored them, assuming it was spam or bots liking his posts, but when he finally checked, his jaw dropped. There on his screen was a response from none other than Vin Diesel himself. "I'm so sorry to hear about what happened to your mom, Jamal," Diesel wrote. "No one deserves to be treated that way. Tell me more about the situation. I want to help." Jamal stared at the message, unable to process what he was reading. Had Vin Diesel really responded? Was this real life? Overwhelmed with gratitude, Jamal quickly replied, sharing every detail of the incident. Little did he know this simple exchange would set off a chain reaction that would ripple far beyond their small Georgia town. Jamal couldn't believe his eyes. Vin Diesel, the action star he idolized, had not only read his message but responded with genuine concern. It felt surreal, like something out of one of Diesel's movies where the hero steps in to fight for justice. But this wasn't a movie, it was real life, and Jamal knew how much this could mean for his mom. Diesel wasted no time. After exchanging a few more messages with Jamal, he asked for permission to share Maria's story publicly. "Awareness is the first step toward change," Diesel explained. Jamal hesitated briefly, knowing that going public might invite unwanted attention, but ultimately agreed. If Diesel thought this could help, then they had to try. The next morning, Diesel posted a video on Instagram. Sitting in front of a plain background, dressed casually in a black t-shirt, he spoke directly into the camera. His tone was calm yet firm, his words deliberate. "Hey everyone, I want to talk about something important today," he began. "Last night, I received a message from a young man named Jamal. He told me about his mom, Maria, who was recently pulled over by police officers in Georgia, not because she did anything wrong, but because of discrimination. She was insulted, disrespected, and treated unfairly simply because of the color of her skin." As Diesel recounted the details of Maria's encounter, his voice grew heavier with emotion. "This isn't just about one incident," he continued. "It's about a pattern of behavior we've seen far too often. No mother, no person deserves to be humiliated like this. We need to stand together and say enough is enough. The video ended with Diesel urging his followers to share the post and demand accountability. Let's make sure Maria's story doesn't go unheard, he concluded. Use the hashtag #JusticeForMaria to spread awareness. Together, we can create change. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Diesel's millions of fans flooded social media platforms, sharing his post and expressing outrage over what had happened to Maria. Hashtags like #JusticeForMaria and our Stand with Maria trended worldwide. People from all walks of life chimed in, condemning the officer's actions and calling for reform. Journalists picked up the story, turning it into national news overnight. Back in Georgia, Maria and Jamal watched the whirlwind unfold from their living room. Their small, quiet town suddenly found itself at the center of a global conversation. Reporters descended upon the streets, setting up cameras outside the police station and knocking on neighbors' doors for comments. Protesters gathered peacefully, holding signs that read, "Respect our community" and "Accountability now." The once calm atmosphere was now electric with tension. For Maria, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. On one hand, she felt grateful that people cared enough to speak up. On the other hand, she worried about retaliation. Some neighbors supported her, bringing meals and offering kind words. Others, however, whispered behind her back, accusing her of exaggerating or seeking fame. "Why did you have to involve someone famous?" one neighbor muttered bitterly. Things were fine until now. Jamal bristled at these remarks. Fine? How could anyone call what happened to his mom fine? He stood by her side, shielding her from negativity whenever possible. "We're doing the right thing, Mom," he reassured her repeatedly. "If we stay silent, nothing will ever change." Meanwhile, the pressure mounted on local authorities. The police department issued a vague statement, promising to investigate the matter thoroughly. But many residents weren't satisfied. They demanded concrete action, disciplinary measures against the officers involved, transparency in the investigation process, and reforms to prevent similar incidents in the future. Diesel remained actively involved, using his platform to keep the momentum alive. He held live streams, answering questions from followers and updating them on developments. He also connected Maria and Jamal with a team of experienced civil rights attorneys willing to take on their case pro bono. "You're not alone in this," Diesel assured them during a phone call. "We'll get through it together." As days turned into weeks, the story continued to dominate headlines. Local news stations aired interviews with residents, some defending the officers and others siding with Maria. Social media debates raged on, with users dissecting every detail of the incident. Critics accused Diesel of meddling in affairs unrelated to him, arguing that celebrities shouldn't interfere in legal matters. Supporters, however, praised his efforts, calling him a true ally in the fight against injustice. Despite the backlash, Diesel refused to step back. He traveled to Georgia personally, arriving unannounced one afternoon. Cameras flashed wildly as he stepped off the plane, flanked by lawyers and activists. His presence sent shockwaves through the town. Residents lined the streets, eager to catch a glimpse of the Hollywood star who had taken up their cause. Diesel's first stop was Maria's home. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, tears welled up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Diesel hugged her tightly, assuring her that she deserved respect and dignity. Jamal looked on, still struggling to process that this was real. Here was his childhood hero, standing in their modest living room, ready to fight alongside them. Together they visited the sheriff's office, where tensions ran high. Diesel sat beside Maria during meetings with officials, asking pointed questions and demanding answers. His charisma and determination left a lasting impression. Even those skeptical of his involvement couldn't deny his sincerity. Behind closed doors, discussions grew heated. The officers involved denied any wrongdoing, insisting they had followed protocol. Dashcam footage from the traffic stop, however, painted a different picture. The recording showed the aggressive tone of the officers and their dismissive attitude toward Maria. Diesel ensured the video was reviewed by independent experts, further solidifying the case against the officers. Public opinion shifted dramatically. What started as skepticism gave way to outrage as more evidence surfaced. The officers' behavior was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern of misconduct within the department. Calls for accountability intensified, forcing state officials to intervene. An independent review board was established to investigate allegations of systemic racism and abuse of power. Throughout this process, Maria and Jamal leaned on each other for strength. Jamal accompanied his mom to rallies and interviews, speaking passionately about the need for change. "My mom works hard every day to provide for our family," he said during one speech. "She deserves to be treated with respect, not judged by the color of her skin." Maria, too, found courage she didn't know she had. Speaking out wasn't easy, especially when faced with hostility, but she realized her voice mattered. Her story resonated with countless others who had endured similar experiences. For the first time, she felt empowered instead of defeated. As the weeks passed, Diesel became more than just a celebrity advocate. He became a symbol of hope. His unwavering support inspired others to join the movement. Activists organized fundraisers to cover legal expenses and support families affected by police misconduct. Celebrities lent their voices to the cause, amplifying the message even further. Though progress was slow, small victories began to emerge. The officers involved in Maria's case were placed on administrative leave, pending the outcome of the investigation. Training programs focused on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation techniques were introduced for law enforcement personnel. While these changes weren't perfect, they represented a step in the right direction. For Jamal, seeing his simple message spark such widespread impact was both humbling and exhilarating. He never imagined that reaching out to a stranger would lead to this moment. And for Maria, the journey reinforced her belief in the power of resilience and community. Together, they proved that even in the face of adversity, standing up for what's right could ignite meaningful change. As the sun set over their small Georgia town, Maria and Jamal sat on their porch, watching the world transform around them. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with allies like Vin Diesel and thousands of supporters cheering them on, they felt ready to face whatever came next. Vin Diesel's arrival in Georgia marked a turning point, not just for Maria and Jamal, but for the entire town. The actor didn't come empty-handed. He brought with him a team of lawyers, activists, and media representatives determined to shine a light on the injustice Maria had faced. His presence was both a beacon of hope and a challenge to the status quo. For many residents, seeing such a high-profile figure take an interest in their community was inspiring. For others, it felt like an unwelcome disruption. Diesel wasted no time getting to work. After meeting Maria and Jamal at their home, he accompanied them to the local police station. The visit drew immediate attention. Reporters and camera crews swarmed the area, capturing every moment as Diesel walked confidently into the building. Inside, tensions were palpable. Sheriff Harris, a gruff man in his late 50s, greeted them with forced politeness. "Mr. Diesel," he said, extending a hand. "We weren't expecting you." "Sheriff," Diesel replied firmly, shaking the man's hand without hesitation. "I'm here because justice needs to be served. Let's talk about what happened to Maria." The meeting that followed was tense. Diesel sat beside Maria and Jamal, flanked by two civil rights attorneys he had personally selected for their expertise. They presented the evidence they had gathered so far: the dashcam footage showing the officers' aggressive behavior, witness statements from other drivers who had seen the traffic stop, and documentation of similar complaints against the same officers in the past. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of misconduct and prejudice. Sheriff Harris tried to downplay the situation. "These officers have been with us for years," he argued. "They're good men who sometimes make mistakes. We can't judge them based on one incident." Diesel leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "One incident? Sheriff, this isn't just about one incident. This is about a pattern. You've had multiple complaints about these officers, yet nothing has been done. That's not accountability, that's negligence. And now, because of your failure to act, a hard-working woman was humiliated in front of her son. Does that sound like good policing to you? Harris shifted uncomfortably in his seat but offered no response. Diesel wasn't finished. If you won't hold them accountable, then we will. This case isn't going away, and neither am I. The message was clear. Diesel meant business. He wasn't just lending his name to the cause. He was fully committed to seeing it through. As the meeting ended, Harris promised to cooperate with the investigation, though his reluctance was evident. Diesel knew better than to trust empty words. He instructed the legal team to file formal complaints and prepare for a lawsuit if necessary. Outside the station, a crowd had gathered. Supporters held signs bearing messages like, "Justice for Maria," and "Equality for all." When Diesel emerged, the cheers were deafening. He raised a hand to quiet the crowd, then addressed them directly. "This fight isn't just about Maria," he said, his voice carrying over the noise. "It's about every person who has ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. It's about holding those in power accountable. Together, we can create real change." His speech energized the crowd, reigniting their determination. Maria stood beside him, her heart swelling with gratitude. She never imagined she'd find herself standing shoulder to shoulder with someone like Vin Diesel, fighting for justice. Jamal, too, felt a surge of pride. Watching his mom stand tall despite everything she'd endured made him realize how strong she truly was. But not everyone welcomed Diesel's involvement. Critics accused him of grandstanding, claiming he was using Maria's story to boost his own image. Some even suggested he was exploiting the situation for publicity. Diesel dismissed these accusations with characteristic calm. "If shining a light on injustice makes me a grandstander, then so be it," he told reporters during a press conference. As the days turned into weeks, the legal battle intensified. With Vin Diesel's support, Maria and Jamal found themselves at the center of a storm that showed no signs of calming. The lawsuit against the police department was officially filed, accusing the officers involved of misconduct, racial profiling, and abuse of power. Diesel ensured that top-notch lawyers were by Maria's side every step of the way, meticulously building a case that left no stone unturned. The process was grueling. Depositions were scheduled, documents were reviewed, and witnesses were interviewed. For Maria, reliving the incident over and over again in court filings and meetings with attorneys was emotionally draining. She often returned home exhausted, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Jamal did his best to keep her spirits up, reminding her why they were fighting, not just for themselves, but for others who might face similar injustices. Diesel remained deeply involved, attending strategy sessions and offering guidance whenever needed. He understood the weight of the responsibility he had taken on and refused to let Maria and Jamal feel alone in their fight. "You've got this," he would tell them during phone calls or visits, "and remember, I'm here with you every step of the way." While the legal team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, Diesel used his platform to keep the public engaged. He hosted live streams where he updated his followers on the progress of the case, emphasizing the importance of accountability and systemic reform. He also shared personal stories from people who had experienced similar encounters with law enforcement, amplifying voices that might otherwise have gone unheard. These efforts kept the momentum alive, ensuring that justice for Maria remained a trending topic worldwide. However, the journey wasn't without its challenges. As the case gained more attention, backlash grew louder. Critics continued to accuse Diesel of meddling in local affairs, while some residents of the town resented the national spotlight being cast on their community. Tensions escalated when anonymous threats began targeting Maria and her family. Late-night phone calls, hateful messages scrawled on their front door, and even suspicious cars parked outside their house became part of their daily reality. Jamal struggled to sleep at night, constantly checking the windows and listening for strange noises. He worried about his mom's safety, knowing how vulnerable she already felt. Maria, too, was shaken but tried to remain strong for her son. "We can't let fear stop us," she told him one evening as they sat together in the living room. If we back down now, nothing will change. Diesel took these threats seriously. He arranged for private security to monitor the property and advised Maria and Jamal to document any incidents immediately. He also reached out to local leaders, urging them to condemn the harassment publicly. Slowly, some neighbors began speaking out in support of Maria, forming a protective circle around her family. It was a small victory, but it gave them hope. Meanwhile, the investigation into the police department uncovered troubling patterns. Records revealed numerous complaints against the two officers involved in Maria's traffic stop, many alleging discriminatory behavior. Internal emails suggested that higher-ups had ignored these complaints, prioritizing optics over accountability. This evidence strengthened Maria's case significantly, proving that the issue extended beyond individual actions. It was systemic. Public pressure mounted as news outlets reported these findings. Protesters gathered regularly outside the police station, demanding transparency and reform. Local businesses displayed signs supporting Maria, and schools held discussions about racism and policing. Even those initially skeptical of Maria's claims began to question the status quo. Change, though slow, seemed inevitable. Despite the mounting evidence, the officers' defense team fought back fiercely. They argued that the dashcam footage didn't capture the full context of the traffic stop and claimed Maria's account was exaggerated. Their tactics frustrated Diesel, who saw them as attempts to deflect responsibility rather than address the core issues. During one particularly heated exchange with the defense attorneys, Diesel leaned across the table and said, "You can twist words all you want, but facts don't lie. Your clients treated Maria like she was less than human, and that's unacceptable." His determination inspired others to speak up. Activists organized rallies not only in Georgia but in cities across the country. Celebrities joined the movement, using their platforms to amplify the message. Social media campaigns encouraged people to contact local officials, urging them to implement reforms in their own communities. What started as a single act of courage by Jamal had snowballed into a nationwide call for justice. Back in Georgia, the legal proceedings dragged on. Court dates were set, postponed, and rescheduled multiple times, testing everyone's patience. But through it all, Maria and Jamal stayed resilient. Jamal accompanied his mom to every hearing, holding her hand tightly as they listened to arguments from both sides. Diesel attended whenever his schedule allowed, sitting quietly in the courtroom and offering silent support. One day, during a particularly tense session, Jamal noticed something remarkable. People filled the gallery, friends, neighbors, activists, and strangers, all united in their desire to see justice served. Some had traveled hours just to be there. It struck Jamal how far they had come since that fateful evening when his mom pulled over on Main Street. What began as a personal tragedy had transformed into a collective effort to challenge injustice. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited eagerly for updates. Diesel addressed the crowd after each hearing, thanking supporters and reaffirming his commitment to the cause. "This isn't just about winning a case," he said during one such appearance. "It's about sending a message that discrimination has no place in our society. We're standing here today because of Maria's bravery, and we won't stop until real change happens." As the weeks passed, the strain began to take its toll. Maria sometimes questioned whether it was worth it, whether the cost of fighting outweighed the potential benefits. But then she'd look at Jamal, whose unwavering belief in doing the right thing reminded her of her late husband. Or she'd think of the countless others who had reached out to share their own stories, thanking her for giving them hope. In those moments, she knew she couldn't give up. Diesel noticed the toll the case was taking and made sure to provide emotional support alongside practical assistance. He invited Maria and Jamal to spend weekends at his ranch, giving them a break from the chaos. There, surrounded by nature and away from prying eyes, they could relax and recharge. These trips became precious respites, strengthening their bond with Diesel and renewing their resolve. By the time fall arrived, the case had reached a critical juncture. The independent review board tasked with investigating the police department released its preliminary findings. Systemic issues existed within the force, including inadequate training, lack of oversight, and a culture of impunity. While the final verdict in Maria's lawsuit was still pending, these revelations signaled a turning point. Reforms were announced, including mandatory diversity training, body cameras for all officers, and a civilian oversight committee to monitor misconduct. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Maria and Jamal allowed themselves a moment of cautious optimism. They had sparked a conversation that couldn't be silenced, a conversation about fairness, equality, and the kind of world they wanted to build. And with Vin Diesel standing beside them, they knew they weren't alone. For Jamal, the experience had been transformative. He realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. For Maria, it was proof that speaking truth to power, no matter how daunting, could lead to meaningful change. Together, they had shown that even in the face of adversity, ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things. As winter approached, the town of Georgia braced itself for what lay ahead. The legal battle might continue, but one thing was clear. Maria, Jamal, and Vin Diesel had ignited a flame that would burn long after the headlines faded. As winter settled over the small Georgia town, the air grew colder, but the fire of determination burned hotter than ever for Maria, Jamal, and Vin Diesel. The legal battle had reached a pivotal stage, with both sides preparing for the final showdown in court. The officers involved in Maria's traffic stop were now facing not only civil charges, but also potential criminal penalties as new evidence continued to emerge. Dashcam footage, witness testimonies, and internal documents painted an undeniable picture of misconduct, leaving little room for denial. Diesel remained a constant presence, attending hearings when possible and staying in close contact with Maria and Jamal. His involvement went beyond just funding the legal team. He became a pillar of emotional support. He often reminded Maria that her courage was inspiring countless others to speak out against injustice. "You're not just fighting for yourself," he told her during one of their phone calls. "You're giving a voice to those who feel silenced." The courtroom drama unfolded over several weeks, drawing national attention. Reporters crowded the hallways, eager to capture every detail. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Lawyers on both sides presented their arguments passionately, each trying to sway the judge and jury. The defense team clung to technicalities, arguing that the officers' behavior, while perhaps inappropriate, didn't rise to the level of criminal conduct. They portrayed Maria as someone seeking revenge rather than justice, attempting to discredit her character. But Maria refused to be intimidated. With Diesel sitting quietly behind her and Jamal by her side, she took the stand to recount her experience. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger. She described the humiliation she felt during the traffic stop, the dismissive tone of the officers, and the lasting impact their words had on her sense of dignity. When asked why she decided to pursue the case despite the backlash, she looked directly at the jury and said, "I'm doing this because no one should have to endure what I went through. Not me, not my son, not anyone else." Her testimony struck a chord. Even some of the jurors appeared visibly moved, their expressions softening as they listened. Jamal watched his mom with pride, realizing how far she had come since that night. Once hesitant to share her story, she now stood confidently before a packed courtroom, refusing to back down. Outside the courthouse, protests continued daily. Activists held signs reading, "Enough is enough" and "Honor over hate." Local organizations joined forces with national groups to demand accountability and systemic reform. Schools incorporated discussions about racial bias and policing into their curricula, ensuring the next generation understood the importance of fairness and equality. The ripple effect of Maria's case was undeniable. It had sparked a movement that transcended the boundaries of their small town. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Anonymous threats escalated, forcing Maria and Jamal to stay vigilant. Security measures around their home were tightened, and Diesel arranged for a crisis counselor to help them cope with the stress. Some nights Jamal lay awake, wondering if the fight was worth the risk. But then he'd think of all the people who had reached out to thank them, the mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters who saw themselves in Maria's story. and he knew they couldn't quit. One particularly difficult day came when the defense attempted to introduce misleading information about Maria's past. They claimed she had prior run-ins with law enforcement, implying she wasn't trustworthy. The accusation stung deeply, especially since it was false. Diesel immediately intervened, working with the legal team to expose the falsehoods. Evidence proved that Maria had never been arrested or cited for anything serious, just minor parking violations years ago. The judge dismissed the defense's claims, calling them irrelevant to the case. That evening, back at home, Maria broke down in tears. "Why are they trying to ruin me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Jamal hugged her tightly, unsure of what to say. Diesel arrived shortly after, having heard about the incident. He sat with them, offering reassurance. "They're desperate," he said firmly. "When people have no real argument, they attack character instead of addressing the truth. Don't let them win." His words bolstered Maria's resolve. She wiped her tears and nodded. "You're right," she said softly. "We can't let them distract us from what really matters." As the trial neared its conclusion, public pressure mounted. Social media campaigns gained renewed energy, with hashtags like #FreeIngerStandWithMaria trending globally. Celebrities, politicians, and activists amplified the message, urging authorities to hold the officers accountable. State officials, feeling the heat, announced plans to implement sweeping reforms within the police department, including stricter hiring practices, ongoing sensitivity training, and independent oversight boards. Finally, after months of deliberation, the verdict arrived. On a cold January morning, the courtroom was packed. Maria and Jamal sat anxiously, holding hands tightly. Diesel stood nearby, his expression calm but resolute. As the judge entered and called the room to order, the tension was palpable. The jury foreman rose to deliver the decision. On the charge of abuse of power, guilty. On the charge of discriminatory conduct, guilty. The words echoed through the room, sending waves of emotion rippling through everyone present. Maria gasped, tears streaming down her face as Jamal embraced her. Diesel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, a small smile playing on his lips. The officers were sentenced to probation, community service, and mandatory counseling. While some felt the punishment should have been harsher, the verdict sent a clear message. Accountability was non-negotiable. More importantly, the ruling paved the way for broader changes within the police department. Mandatory body cameras were implemented, and a civilian review board was established to handle complaints of misconduct. For Maria and Jamal, the victory was bittersweet. It had been a long, exhausting journey, and scars remained. But they also felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had taken a stand against injustice and inspired others to do the same. Their courage had sparked conversations that would continue long after the headlines faded. Diesel celebrated the outcome with them, hosting a private dinner at his ranch. Surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, Maria reflected on how much had changed since that summer evening. "I never imagined something like this could happen to us," she said, raising a glass. "But I'm grateful for everything we've achieved together. This isn't just our victory. It belongs to everyone who believes in justice." Jamal nodded, looking around the table. "We proved that even ordinary people can make a difference," he added. "And we couldn't have done it without you, Mr. Diesel." Diesel smiled warmly. "Call me Vin," he said with a chuckle. "And remember, this is just the beginning. There's still so much work to be done." As the night wore on, laughter and conversation filled the air. For the first time in months, Maria allowed herself to relax, knowing they had fought the good fight. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she and Jamal faced it with newfound strength, and the knowledge that they weren't alone. In the weeks that followed, life began returning to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a transformative experience. Maria returned to work, greeted by colleagues who congratulated her on her bravery. Jamal threw himself into school projects, channeling his energy into raising awareness about racial equality. and Diesel continued using his platform to advocate for change, ensuring Maria's story remained a catalyst for progress. Though the spotlight eventually dimmed, the legacy of their fight endured. In classrooms, town halls, and social media threads, people kept talking about justice for Maria. The case became a symbol of resilience, reminding everyone that standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, can lead to meaningful change. And in the hearts of Maria, Jamal, and Vin Diesel, the bond forged through adversity remained unbreakable, a testament to the power of unity and hope. The months following the verdict brought a mix of relief and reflection for Maria, Jamal, and Vin Diesel. While the legal battle had ended, its impact lingered in ways none of them could have anticipated. The small Georgia town where it all began transformed slowly but surely, shaped by the conversations and reforms sparked by Maria's courage. What started as a personal struggle had become a movement, a beacon of hope for communities across the country. Maria returned to her routine, balancing work at the hospital with spending quality time with Jamal. Yet life felt different now. She carried herself with newfound confidence, no longer afraid to speak up when something seemed wrong. Her colleagues noticed the change too. She became a source of inspiration among the staff, often sharing stories about resilience and standing up for one's rights. Some even joked that she'd become a local celebrity, though Maria brushed off the attention modestly. "I'm just a mom trying to do what's right," she would say with a smile. Jamal, meanwhile, embraced his role as an advocate. At school, he joined student-led initiatives focused on racial equality and police reform. His teachers praised his leadership skills, noting how he encouraged classmates to think critically about social issues. During a school assembly, Jamal delivered a speech that left the audience silent, and then erupting into applause. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "But if we keep talking, listening, and standing together, we can make things better, for ourselves, for our families, and for future generations." His words resonated deeply, especially with younger students who looked up to him as someone who had faced adversity head-on and come out stronger. Jamal realized that while the fight for justice was far from over, every effort mattered. Even small actions, like speaking kindly to someone being bullied or calling out unfair treatment, could create ripples of positivity. Vin Diesel remained a steadfast ally, continuing to amplify Maria and Jamal's story whenever possible. He used his films, interviews, and social media platforms to highlight systemic injustices and promote meaningful dialogue. In one particularly moving interview, he spoke candidly about his own experiences growing up biracial and how they shaped his perspective on racism. "We all have a responsibility to challenge inequality wherever we see it," he told the host. "It's not enough to say you're not racist. You have to be actively anti-racist. That means listening, learning, and taking action." Diesel also established a foundation aimed at supporting victims of police misconduct and funding educational programs on diversity and inclusion. Named after Maria, the foundation quickly gained traction, attracting donations from supporters worldwide. Its mission was simple yet powerful: to empower individuals and communities to demand accountability and fairness. For Maria and Jamal, seeing their name associated with such a noble cause filled them with pride. Back in Georgia, the changes within the police department began to take root. Mandatory body cameras ensured transparency during interactions with the public, while sensitivity training helped officers recognize and address biases. The newly formed Civilian Oversight Board reviewed complaints thoroughly, holding law enforcement accountable in ways that hadn't been done before. Residents reported feeling safer and more respected, though some skepticism remained. Trust, after all, took time to rebuild. The town itself underwent subtle shifts. Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors now engaged in open discussions about race and privilege. Schools introduced workshops on empathy and understanding, encouraging students to celebrate differences rather than fear them. Local businesses displayed signs pledging support for equality, creating a visible reminder of the community's commitment to progress. Despite these positive developments, challenges persisted. Not everyone welcomed the changes, and pockets, of resistance lingered. Some residents accused outsiders like Diesel of imposing their views on the town, while others dismissed the reforms as unnecessary. But Maria, Jamal, and their allies refused to let negativity derail their efforts. They understood that change rarely came without pushback, and that perseverance was key. One evening, several months after the trial, Maria and Jamal attended a community event hosted by the Oversight Board. It was held in the town square, illuminated by strings of fairy lights strung between trees. Booths lined the area, offering resources on everything from mental health to voter registration. Live music played softly in the background as people mingled, sharing stories and ideas. As Maria walked through the crowd, she was greeted warmly by familiar faces. A group of teenagers approached her, thanking her for inspiring them to get involved in activism. An elderly couple stopped to shake her hand, saying they were proud of how she handled herself throughout the ordeal. Even Sheriff Harris made an appearance, albeit briefly, acknowledging the importance of rebuilding trust. Diesel joined them later, having flown in for the occasion. Dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, he blended seamlessly with the crowd. He spent hours chatting with attendees, listening intently to their concerns and suggestions. When asked to speak, he kept his remarks brief but heartfelt. "This isn't my victory, it's yours," he said, gesturing toward the gathering. "You've shown that when people unite around a common goal, anything is possible. Keep pushing forward." By the end of the night, Maria stood beside Diesel and Jamal, looking out at the sea of smiling faces. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the outcome of her case, but for the connections forged along the way. Strangers had become friends, adversaries had turned into collaborators, and a divided community had found common ground. In the years that followed, Maria and Jamal continued to build on the momentum they had created. Jamal graduated high school with honors and earned a scholarship to study political science in college, driven by a desire to effect policy-level change. Maria expanded her nursing career, mentoring young professionals and advocating for equitable healthcare access. Diesel remained a close friend, visiting whenever he could and checking in regularly. Their story became part of history, a testament to the power of courage, unity, and determination. Textbooks featured Maria's case as an example of grassroots activism leading to systemic reform. Documentaries highlighted the role celebrities like Diesel could play in amplifying marginalized voices. And hashtags like Justice for Maria evolved into symbols of hope, reminding people everywhere that no act of bravery went unnoticed. Looking back, Maria often thought about that fateful summer evening when her life changed forever. If Jamal hadn't sent that message to Vin Diesel, would anyone have listened? Would the town still be grappling silently with its issues? She didn't know. What she did know was this: standing up for what was right, even when it felt impossible, had made all the difference. On quiet nights, sitting on the porch with Jamal, Maria would sometimes ask him, "Do you think we made a difference?" Jamal would grin and reply, "Mom, we didn't just make a difference, we started something bigger than us." And in those moments, surrounded by love and purpose, Maria knew they had truly succeeded. They had proven that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things and that even in the darkest times hope could shine brightest.